Hello, welcome to It's About Youth. I'm Soraya Mia, and today we will be discussing political awareness among youths. All right, so more and more Malaysians or young Malaysians are becoming more apathetic towards politics. According to a pollster, Merdeka Centre's National Youth Survey, 66% of young people believe that leaders and politicians do not care, while 70% of them have little interest in learning politics, and 78% stated that politics and governmental issues are too complicated. So to discuss the state of political awareness in Malaysia, as well as how it impacts our democratic system, we have Maha Balakrishnan, who is a parliamentary expert, as well as Azman Azeez, who is the Vice President of the Malaysian Youth Council. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I'm very excited to be learning as well as talking to you guys. So let's just start the conversation today with perhaps the statistics that I just mentioned by Merdeka Center. What does this actually mean to our democratic system?
Well, I think clearly there is a disconnect between Malaysians, and specifically young Malaysians, and politics. And I think a lot of that is linked to a lack of political literacy amongst young Malaysians, but actually across the board. There are a number of reasons for this, but I think it's important actually to first understand what is political literacy, right? And political literacy includes basic concepts like understanding the idea of nationhood, the idea of what citizenship means, the idea of what a state's duties and powers are, and what a citizen's rights and obligations are in relation to that. The idea of what fundamental liberties mean, where they come from, why they are important, and also the idea of all these concepts that create good governance, like separation of powers, check and balances, rule of law, and for Malaysia, federalism as well. And that's not enough. Political literacy also means that we as Malaysians should also have at least a basic understanding of our place in the region, our place in the world, an understanding of what our historical background is and how that links up to contemporary politics and our present. And I think it's this understanding, it's the ability to connect the dots between politics, policy, and the money in our pockets, the food in our bellies, the roof over our heads, our physical security, our online security, our climate security. It's the inability to connect that, I think, that has resulted in such a high level of apathy amongst young Malaysians particularly.
Yeah, with what Maha just explained about political literacy, we now know that everything is interconnected and how important it is. Probably, Azman, why do you think that there is perhaps a gap, in political literacy in young Malaysians?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me today. In fact, I completely agree with what Maha mentioned earlier. I think in terms of the fundamentals, in terms of the basics, I think that's the things that I think the young people are lacking. In fact, we in Malaysian Youth Council, we does a series of School of Politics program, trying to get to as many youth out there and trying to understand, where are they at the moment, what state they are at the moment in terms of political literacy. And it's quite worrying for us to actually get to know that. And then, even though, yes, now we have managed to reduce the voting age to 18 years old, but whether they are really prepared, to become a sound voter when comes election, that's another question that we really need to answer. Because I believe in the idea of reducing the voting age. Yes, we need to encourage more young people to participate in making a very important decision for the country. But at the same time, we need to make sure that they are prepared. And that's why I think not just education institution, but also family members, other members of the public, like such ourselves, for example, non-government organizations. We have to try to engage as many as possible youth out there and trying to explain to them, why is it very important for them to participate and why they need to understand the fundamentals, the basics, in order for them to become a sound decision maker in terms of voting.
Yeah, talking about preparation. Of course, we have to link this with education institutions. And okay, personally, I was not exposed to sort of parliamentary processes or how the parliament works, political literacy in schools. Perhaps I was just recently, exposed to it when I started my job as a journalist. So we know what parliament is, but we don't know how it works. So is the current syllabus enough, to create a political literate society?
Well, I don't work in the Ministry of Education or in any education institution directly, but certainly from my experience, there is a huge dearth of education at national level, within the national curriculum. I think what we see missing are all the issues that we've both, I think, spoken about. We don't see this within the national curriculum, and there's multiple ways of doing it. Obviously, dispensing political literacy through the education system, the national school system, is the best method, simply because they have the access already, right? They have the route and path to reach as many young Malaysians as possible at the earliest possible age. But apart from that, it is also important if it's put, or rather run through the education system, so that you can have a level of standardization, a level of perhaps a better vetting process over the syllabus and the curriculum. And I think what we see in other countries have actually taken quite proactive steps to at least introduce basic political literacy into the school systems. And there are different ways of doing this. You can either create special subjects on this, citizenship studies, for example, in the UK, or you can immerse it and include it within other subjects. My preferred mode, I think, is to have a separate syllabus, a discrete syllabus that focuses not simply on citizenship rights, but political understanding as a whole. So I look forward. This conversation, of course, has been happening for over the last number of years. And there have been discussions before about perhaps even introducing something along the lines of Rukun Negara studies, I believe. This came up last year. I'm not certain what they mean by Rukun Negara studies, but I do welcome any initiatives by any of the political parties that are running in this election to include this as a core component of their election manifestos.
I definitely agree with that point. Now, we have a lot more to discuss, but we are going to head off for a quick break. Stay tuned. Hi and welcome back to It's About Youth. I'm speaking to Azman Azeez, the Vice President of Malaysian Youth Council, as well as parliamentary expert Maha Balakrishnan. Now, we are going to ask Azman actually, because aside from the Malaysian Youth Council, he is also the UMNO Division Exco of Baling. So I want to know, what is the conversation like? Working on ground. How is your experience reaching out to the youths in Baling? It's quite, the sort of the figurehead in Baling, right? So tell us your experience there.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think the situation, like I mentioned earlier, which is quite worrying because most of them, they don't even understand the fundamentals, the basics, as what we mentioned earlier, in terms of the processes, democratic processes that happens. They know about politics is what they see on social media. So that's the challenge, because whatever they see on social media is all a political fiasco. It's political controversies between political parties or political figures. So we do not want that to be the main portrayal in terms of that's the politics of the reality. So to me, the challenge for us to actually engage with them, the first challenge is how can we engage them and talk about this matter or this subject, which clearly they have no interest whatsoever in today's generation and the young people. So what we have to do in Baling, for example, I can give an example. So we have to approach it via the activities that they like to do. which is highly sports related, in terms of playing football with them, futsal. Now it's into esports, e-gamings and all that. So we have to start to engage with them, make us more friendlier with them, and then we penetrate by putting some questions or trying to understand their position in terms of what are their understanding when it comes to political literacy. So it's a challenge, but I think it's doable. And I agree with Maha mentioned earlier, which is it goes back to the root methodology, which we have to put it into our syllabus, into our education syllabus, this specific political literacy education. Because myself, I started early, to be honest. I have interest in politics as young as 16 or 15 years old, if not mistaken, still back in high school, where I know and I see most of my friends, have no idea what politics is all about. They don't even bother or care to read the news and all that when it comes to politics. But somehow I have that interest, and I started early. And then, in fact, I joined this youth parliament program when I was 18. I was the youngest member for the first batch. So, it differs from one individual to an individual. But when it comes to today's reality, the voting age has been reduced to 18 years old, so we have no choice. We have to prepare them early. We have to make sure that they really know, what they are doing, and they are making a very huge decision.
Absolutely.
So, for example, if they know close to nothing, and what they see is just, as I mentioned earlier, which is what they see on social media, and that's how they make the decision when it comes to election, I think it will be a problem because they don't understand the basic fundamentals.
Right, as you mentioned, what they see on social media, what they see in the media, that's actually a big sort of issue in the country.
Yes, it is.
So, what do you think about this, and how do you actually sort of manage this issue, and how do you reach out to these people to educate them on the current system?
I think it's scary, to be honest, because as citizens, we have so much power in our vote. We have so much power if we organize to push for action, to push for change. And if all this power is done in a vacuum, without understanding the first principles around policy and politics, that is actually a very dangerous scenario. For example, before we can even get behind the wheel in a car, right? There are so many things that we must know. There are tests that we need to pass. We need to understand the rules for driving on roads. We need to understand what the laws are. We need to understand what the road signs mean before we can actually turn the engine on and start, right? And you have a period of probationary period even for that. Now, similarly, when it comes to exercising our rights as citizens, if we were to do it in a vacuum without understanding first principles, then either we will act irresponsibly, or we may not fully be able to take advantage of the opportunities and intervention points that are available within the system, for us to actually make a change.
Yes.
And to me, I think this is what I feel has been missing. Yes, I completely agree. Reducing the voting age to 18 was necessary. AVR was necessary, but it ought to have been done alongside an education program.
Now, I would like actually to point out one of the sort of reforms that the government, or the caretaker government, has pushed for, which is the anti-hopping law. So the anti-hopping law is actually one of the sort of reforms that we want to see in the country, but then are people aware of how it impacts, their rights to vote, as well as the democratic system? Maybe you could explain a little bit on that?
Well, what the anti-hopping law effectively means is that it restrains MPs from really switching parties post-election. But I do think that an understanding of the impact of that law is perhaps not really widely understood by many, not simply citizens, but I think even politicians. And I think I'm not entirely certain that the changes that have been made to the Constitution are even foolproof. I do have some concerns that post-election, if we do find ourselves in a position where we have perhaps not one party with a clear majority, we might see issues arising, even from how the anti-hopping laws are to be interpreted and applied. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we have a level of certain understanding, especially the youth, in terms of anti-hopping law. I mean, the straightforward case is to avoid our MPs from jumping ship and cause whatever happened to our country a few years back. And we can see changes in a couple of years. In fact, in a year period, we see 3 prime minister, and that's never happened before. So stability, it goes back to stability, is very important. And I think this anti-hopping law is a very good start to actually regain confidence. It's not just for the young people, but the general electorate, to go out and vote. Because if not, my normal conversation with folks down there, most of them say that they don't believe in the system anymore, and they don't want to go out and vote. To them, it's like there's no different. It's like all of them are the same. So that's why I think it's very important for us to start somewhere, trying to regain confidence and trust of the people to go back to the system and make a change, and to ensure that whatever we aspire to achieve as a nation can be achieved with a political stability. So that's why I think this anti-hopping law is a good start. But again, of course, if you look at it in a more detailed perspective, interpretation, so that I think has to be
definitely complicating.
To look in more depth. Like you said, as mentioned, it's not just a general citizen, but even the politicians themselves. Do they really understand in terms of the specific of the law?
And I do think more is needed. To make it work, to create a stable political system, to get back public's belief in politics and politicians and the political system. I think we also need other laws, like political financing laws, better anti-corruption laws, and certainly I think also a stronger parliament.
With all of these laws, I think it's also important to add the education behind it, to kind of raise awareness, not only in the public, but also amongst politicians and lawmakers. Now, so I just want to ask probably one last question for the both of you. But what do you think, how do you think a more political literate society would sort of shape politicians moving forward? Anyone want to go first?
Well, I can start. The quality of the government relies on the quality of the governed. I think that's statement is very significant to the question that you ask. So it goes back to us as a citizen. What do we want? What do we want from the leaders that we have today? How we can make and hold them accountable? So we have to have knowledge. We have to know the basic fundamentals, principles, laws, in order for us to actually hold them accountable. For example, if we don't really understand what are the roles of the MPs, for example. If you ask the young people nowadays, they can't even differentiate what's Dewan Rakyat and Dewan Negara. For example, for instance, they can't even differentiate between, for example, a member of parliament and the state assemblyman, ahli parliament and adun. So these are the basic terms, and these are the basic terminologies that we should have, long time ago, trying to explain and disseminate to the young people so that they are aware. These are the roles and responsibility. Because today, especially in the rural area, MPs are being seen as, I don't know, it's like a doctor. You can see like everybody lining up in front of their house every day in the morning, trying to solve basic issues, for example, paying their house bill, phone bills, and that kind of sentiment. So to me, we have to, educate. So it goes back to education. How can we actually educate them in terms of the basic responsibility of an MP? And what are they? They are the rule maker. They are the lawmaker. So to solve these short-term issues, okay, sometimes, it is doable by some MPs. They have the ability to solve. But the more crucial issue is the long-term issue that has been solved through the Dewan Rakyat, by passing
So my
law.
understanding is education is very, very important, and we, at least now is a good time to, start somewhere. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have left. I wish we could discuss more, but that's all for me on It's About Youth. I'm Soraya Mia. Thank you, and we'll see you again.